G'day everyone, welcome to this week's Life on the Hulls, and I've got a big thing happening tomorrow. We're basically going to spray the hardtop. Last week, about 9 days ago, I faired and spent all weekend fairing, sanding, overhead sanding of this stinker. There's a short video up on YouTube and on Facebook. You can have a look at it, me fairing this entire area. And as you can see, it's beautiful, it's looking smooth and it's ready for spray. So tomorrow morning, Janet and I are in, she's gonna be mixing and I'm gonna be spraying. We're gonna basically tint this whole thing off. We've masked everywhere to make sure we don't get any overspray, and we're just gonna get straight into it. So this week, we've got lots coming up. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe. Let's get into it. Now with our stern tube and propeller finally in place in the right position, I've got the actual shaft attached to the engine and the stern tube in place here, and I can determine the opening and closing motion of our Verifold prop. Ultimately, I'm now working on the rudder. Now I have a rudder plan that was given to me by a mate of mine, Darren, who's obviously acquired it from somebody else. I'm not sure who he got it from, but really appreciate the fact that I've got a copy of this. Now I do have to change it a little bit. The angle up here is very different, but I've just pinned it in place here. We're at the distance that was recommended from the stern of the boat, and very, very important that I get decent clearance here, obviously for the rudder to move and also for the prop to work. Now I've allowed about 15 centimetres. I think that's more than enough, and this is going to work a treat, this rudder. I've just made the copy of the plan onto a piece of cardboard, and I've got it vertical here, and I've determined the actual entry point into the boat here. It's dead centre in the stern of the boat here, and then I've got to work out how I'm going to support that inside here. Now I've been in contact with Jeffer, and basically they've come up with a bottom and top bearing arrangement so that I can still have my tiller on top within a shelf up here somewhere on the boat. But there's going to be a lot of thinking going in here, because I also have to think about a rudder sensor and also the hydraulics that are going to be pushing this. I need to think about where I'm going to position those, and in relation to the tiller itself, there's a lot of work to be done in this area here to make this work. Now I still have to fabricate these rudders. I'm going to leave that till the new year. I intend to lay up a nice sheet of carbon and make 3 rudder blades, and then I'm going to basically do them. So that's going to be pretty nice to do something different for a change up in the factory. I've got carbon shafts, so 50mm carbon shafts, and they require an anodized aluminium sleeve to be glued onto them to make the bearing work correctly. I'm not going to fabricate my own bearings. I have a strong feeling about this sort of thing. I like to buy what's commercially available so that I can just order one, get it flown out to me, and I can replace it anywhere in the world, and probably even carry a couple of spares as well. So that's sort of what I'm thinking anyway, and I can guarantee that I can get the seals to work correctly. I could get someone to machine some bearings for me, but I think this is going to be a far better option, and there's going to be a lot of glass work in this area here in the actual the rudder tube, and there'll be 2 bearings with per lip seals on the top of them, and then the tiller on the top. Now the tiller will be above the water line, so it is essentially shouldn't let any water in anyway, and but the advantage of using the sleeve on the shaft means that I'm going to get a very good seal on the bearing, and very little movement, which should preclude water in the first instance, and the second bearing will have a seal on the top of it to stop any water from breaching into my lazarette section here. So I'm going to go inside in a moment. I'm going to drill a hole in the bottom of the boat here where the rudder is going to protrude, and then I have to work out how I'm going to support that glass tube that actually has those bearings in it, and similarly where I'm going to position the tiller and where I'm going to position the hydraulic arm that's going to drive that tiller. And also I would also like the backup of being able to hand tiller this boat should the hydraulics fail. So I'll be putting a deck hatch in that second step that'll allow me to open the hatch, put a tiller in, and hopefully be able to then hand steer that with a tiller. So there's a lot of things. I've got trying for redundancy, I'm not trying for function, but I'm also going to buy commercially available rudder bearings that are going to be easily replaceable and certainly available worldwide. Alright, so we're going to get down in here and have a good look at what I need to do. Alright, so I have this template for a rudder support, and the rudder tube should come up through here and then have the tiller on the top. So I'm just going to see how that's going to fit over the top of what I've already established as the point for our rudder entry, which is right here. Now, I couldn't determine that until I put the prop and the shaft in place, so it's really good to get to this stage. I actually know exactly where it needs to fit now. Now, very importantly, this point here is where the rudder tube will come up, and the gland, or the rudder bearing, will be here. There'll be another one up here somewhere. Now, water line is around about just below this chine right here. As you can see here, this chine, the water line's about here. I intend to have the rudder top bearing around about here, and then the tiller up in this height here. Now, I've got to work out how I'm going to make my hydraulic and the rudder sensor operate here, as well as all the other stuff I've got in here, which is the exhaust and everything else. And I also would like to use that area back there. I've actually opted not to put a bulkhead in there. I don't really see it's necessary. This is basically as robust and as strong as it needs to be, and this is already a sealed bulkhead. I'm in here already. I may put a vertical bulkhead in there just to put some more support under this back step here, but for now, and that's my spot there, I'm going to work out the rest of it from here. Now, this template came when I bought the mould, and it will give me a bit of a rough idea as to how I would like to establish this rudder support, but I certainly don't need this shape, because this originally was a step that you could actually step down onto. I don't need that because I've basically got a separate setup as it stands, but I need it exactly over the top of the entry point of the rudder, because the rudder tube will come up through all the way up to here, and the tiller will be here somewhere, way above water line, and away from harm, and certainly to stop any water from seeping into the lazarette here. That was wet laminated, and that was not coming off. Alright, I've sat in here for some time trying to work out the best way to support this. Now, this is going to be clawed back probably to double that size. I'll just cut this so I can get the length for the rudder tube. Now, this is only 90mm pipe. This is going to be a 110mm tube here with a bearing in the bottom and another one at the top. So the rudder tube that goes into where the rudder sits directly below is 110mm wide, and I've got a couple of options. I can put in a foam pyramid, like a brace there, a brace here, a brace here, and another one there. It doesn't even have to be that high, because I'll be putting in some substantial fillets. Now, this is going to be solid glass and about a centimetre thick, where the rudder is going to protrude into the actual boat with a big epoxy fillet in it. The other option I have is to put in a smaller shelf and bond it to the side of the boat. And I sort of like that idea, so I've come up with this idea. I don't know whether this will be the final iteration of the whole deal, but it certainly has a bit of a nice redundancy here, because you've got a secondary brace here. Okay, here's my steering discs. Now, these come from High Drive. These are actually a South Australian company that are made in Australia, distributed and basically owned by a company called Coursemaster, who also make autopilots. Now, if I'd have known that, I would have bought a Coursemaster autopilot. However, I've gone with Garmin because I've got a complete Garmin suite. However, these are the business, and I have the complete high drive HD5, the Helm series steering system, which is the Helm unit, and all the pistons and obviously the oil and the componentry. I have a Vetus 50mm aluminium tiller here. Now these are beautiful. They do have a keyway in them. I'm not really sure how I'm going to do that. I don't think I'll be using a keyway. I think I'm more likely to pass a bolt through the shaft to position it, and that will sit on top. Now I wish it was longer, because it's not getting it right to the outside here. I would have liked it over here somewhere, but it's not. So I'm going to have to work with it, and that's going to create a little bit of a jam, or a bit of a log jam here, where I'm going to have a piston moving not so much at 90 degrees. So I may well have to position this here. Now, you just wouldn't believe how I get some of these angles. I mean, I've got clamps everywhere with cameras. I've got one camera and a heap of clamps. So, you know, you're lucky you get any angles at all, really. Alright, let's get this piston in here. This has got a fair bit of weight to it. So I've put a bit of a shelf in, and I've just clamped it in place. It goes all the way back to the bulkhead. Now, I anticipate running hydraulic lines down through here, straight to this piston, and back. So that this is the inboard side. So as you can see, on the inside of the boat here. And that'll minimise the amount of tubing that I have. I don't want to take another 4 feet over to the other side. It'll create another 10 feet of lines. I want to minimise the amount of lines, and all this stuff should be on the inboard side, freeing up room on the other side for all of my exhaust system. A little bit neat in here. Not quite big enough to sit in, but anyway. I digress and whinge like an old man. I sit in these holes back here. Right, so I have the high drive piston here, and reveal this 1-3 piston. It's about 75 centimetres long. If this were the centre of the rudder, with the rudder basically fore and aft, and this is say 90 degrees to the rudder, I would essentially need to position this piston right here, should I decide to have it nice and symmetrical and all square. Now that's going to restrict a lot of my storage room, and as you can see, I'm sitting in pretty much the only available space. I really don't want to lose this space, and I intend to use this space for things like fenders and things. So the last thing you want to do is stick a fender in the rudder not to be able to operate. So my thinking is that if I lock the rudder something like there, I should be able to position my piston somewhere like so. So what's just become very clear to me is that I can't have this shelf at the same level as the support for the rudder. It's going to be around about 150mm or 200mm higher because of the height of the tiller. I've just set it there for convenience sake, just to demonstrate here. Now this push rod has to push this tiller 35 degrees that way, and it also has to pull it 35 degrees this way, roughly. It can't be straight. I don't think, and the reason why that is that I need to allow room for travel of this piston back and forth to the full length of the travel, and that's a little bit complicated here because I'm running out of room here. I do have to be a little bit careful, so I may need to move this in or outwards a little bit towards the outside of the hull, just to get it to the point where I can get sufficient travel, and I think it was 35 centimetres each way to action the tiller. So I'm sort of on the money. I think I'm sort of getting to the point where I can see what I need to do. I need to have a nice think about how I want to lay this out, because I want it to be out of the way, but I also want it to be incredibly functional. So if I do this side right, I can almost replicate it on the other side. Alright, so I'm going to have to do some reading, because there is a minimum length of push rod on these pistons that you need to allow when setting this up, and it does need to be at 90 degrees to the tiller arm. So I'll just show you where I'm at. I've got a 90-degree angle here, and I'm pretty much at around half the travel at 90 degrees, and there's the subsequent overhang on the forward end of this piston. Now, if that was positioned like so, that means that this can push the tiller arm 35 degrees that way and pull it 35 degrees that way without banging into the end of this. We have to make sure that there is enough movement in the cotter pin, and there's a cotter pin and a couple of split rings there that actually join to this, and I'm going to have to put potentially a ball joint or something of that matter on there to make this all work. And clearly this part here is fixed down to a shelf, but this is allowed to move inside the bracket here. There's a little bit of movement to allow for the sort of the roll, I guess, of the piston. So yeah, pretty complicated, but not that difficult. It's just you've got to get the geometry right if you don't. Now, so what I'm planning here to do is this shelf. If I were to fabricate this shelf out of foam, but instead of having a 90-degree angle, I could make a nice curve here, glass that in there, and then I've got room over here for other stuff, i.e. the hydraulic lines and everything to be funneled away here, and obviously it gives me a little bit better storage. So if this only needed to be, say, there, which allows for this to go all the way back to here, which is pretty much optimal by the look of it, this shelf only really needs to come to here. It doesn't need to be full length, because I don't want anyone stepping on it either. It's sort of, I just want it as it's pretty much a utility shelf for the hydraulics and for nothing else. I don't want to be using it as a step. So my next job is to make some sort of a fairing that brings the back of this boat back to the end of the shaft and the stern tube here, and that will be, I think I've shown you this before, similar shape to this. Now this is actually the mould of the last boat they produced. However, I'm not going to make a moulded part. I probably could and then just glass it on, but I'm sort of erring towards doing a complete solid foam block, so there's no chance of any water ever getting into this section here. It'll look a bit like that. In fact, it's going to look exactly like that. And but I'm not going to use this, but I'm really glad I had it because it gave me sort of the parameters with which I've got to work with. Cool, so as you can see, I'm only going to need to put probably another slight slither of 30mm down to about here, and then 20mm down to here. So I'm just going to build it up, and then I'll be able to shape it back to around about here. I'm going to have to add another bit, a couple of bits on the end, but yeah, that's really cool. That's solved my problem. This is going to be filled with epoxy here, so we've got a really good solution here. Alright, it's time to glue these on, and once they're glued in place and solid tomorrow, I'll be able to then build on them to get the fairing required. You'll notice here that I've actually put in 5 layers of 600 double bias and 2 layers of a 300 woven roving tape to join it to the actual hole, so that's plenty of strength. There's also going to be glass on the inside there, and on the inside as well, so 4 points, and then ultimately this is going to be glass back to the tube here as well, so really 5 points plus the bolstering of the block. So no issues with strength in this stern tube. Going to basically get that done. I've just repaired it. I've put some masking tape over the top of my grub screw here and over the cutlass bearing to make sure I don't get any glue anywhere near any of that, because I don't want that to happen, because I'll never get the shaft out. And then I'm going to lather this, and then basically I'm going to shoot some epoxy inside here, and then I'm going to feed it in through here under force and make sure that I get plenty up inside there to backfill and make it all solid. And there, we're ready to go. We're done. It's not often that I do work that I'm not very proud of, and today's the day, and I don't often show it. I tend to like to get things right all the time. You know, I love a good result, and sometimes I have to do the dodgy to get that good result. So today, rather than cut up a sheet of good foam, I'm trying to save it for a future project, which is coming up on this boat. I've used remnants of foam to build this guy up, and a massive bag of epoxy. So that's all glued in place, and I'm going to be able to shave that back with my sander. I'm hoping I've got enough on there. I think I've got enough to cover it. That's about as ugly as a toad. And I've done the other side as well. Now, I couldn't have filmed that process because there was swearing involved, and the swearing was pretty unpleasant. I hate to do it, but sometimes you just got to put it up there, because I've been sat on my ass down here for 3 or 4 hours getting the pieces in place, and then ultimately I had it all masked up together, and then I had to pull it apart, and then I had to glue it. So there's about half a kilo of epoxy in there holding that together. But yeah, that's pretty much the shape I'm after. And I'm going to work on the sculpturing a bit later on. Sometimes you've got to dodgy something to get it right. I'll just show you what I've done over here. Same deal. Lots of blocks, and to be honest, having the basis there of that big chunk that I put in yesterday was the key, but it's pretty much almost there to the shape that I'm going to need it. And then I'm going to go for some pretty accurate sanding back and a lot of hand sanding and fairing to get that right. I don't really want a big chunk there. I do want it to come quite slender back onto the stern tube. So this is going to go pretty much all the way back. And then this, I've left a heap of glass here to glass the final part of the flute onto the stern tube there. Now we've got 50 knot winds here, the Savo. It is putrid. Janet was out on marine rescue all day today, and it was pretty awful out there. They had we've got a 6 metre sea running, and hopefully they don't get any rescues. It's been an absolute beast of a day, and the wind's going to intensify tonight, and I'm glad to hear that Janet's back off the water. So we've sort of been worried about her because the swells are massive, and there's a team of them out there doing some assessments and some pretty much some drills just to get through the next level of our qualifications with marine rescue. And while I've been sat down there just swearing, and I've had about 10 visitors today, I just got absolutely nothing else done. Fair income today has been one of those days.